The Paddy Power Half Hour on Off the Ball.
With Paddy Power, the greatest football partnership since Shearer and Owen.
Paddy Power Half Hour here on offtheball.com. Over the next half hour, it's all about the magic of the Cup, the third round of the FA Cup, as we maybe put the Premier League to one side, with Liverpool currently 13 points clear. They take on their Merseyside rivals Everton in the third round of the FA Cup this weekend. Some other great ties as well, including high-flying Championship side Leeds against what looks like a rejuvenated Arsenal. Here with me to look forward to all the games this weekend is, first of all, the new host of Team 33 on News Talk. It's Enda Coll.
How are you well?
The curator of Enda's Coll. And Phil's picks. It's Phil Egan from offtheball.com as well. Gentlemen, good afternoon to you.
How are you well?
How do you feel, first of all, about the FA Cup third round? Is this a nice break away from the Premier League, or has the Cup actually lost a little bit of lustre in recent seasons, Phil?
Yeah, I think it's lost its lustre a long time ago. Even there's 32 games on this weekend, and they're spread all over the shop in terms of kick-off times. And I get the game has moved on and TV and all that, but you think back to when you kind of started watching football and you were watching, I think back to memories of Mickey Adams knocking in the goal against, sorry, I completely forgot his name, the guy that scored that goal for Wrexham against Arsenal, the free kick.
Yeah.
You're thinking of games like that where you're watching at 3 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon.
It used to make for the best match of the day of the year as well, because nearly every game was at 3 p.m. You usually had one late game on. Mickey Thomas, the goal you're thinking of.
Couldn't think of Thomas.
But in terms of the later games that would be on, you maybe have one televised game, a Sunday live game, but generally you maybe 20, 25 fixtures at 3 o'clock, and it would be manic when you sat down at 10:30 to watch Match of the Day.
Absolutely, whereas now it's scattered all over the shop and it finishes up on a Monday. And, you know, you'll see it also as well, because the festive period's been so busy, Premier League managers look at it, and Championship managers now, as this is the time to rest players, because they have to. I mean, if they're going to their medical teams saying, how are my players looking for this weekend? The medics are saying, they're all in the red here, so you need to take out as many as you can.
It takes a little bit off, doesn't it, when you consider particularly the Merseyside derby this weekend, where very clear that Liverpool wanted to get as much of an advantage at the top of the Premier League as they could. They dispatched Sheffield United quite comfortably last night as well. But when they take on Everton, they're likely to play a pretty second-string team. Well, even Everton have come off the back of 3 difficult fixtures over the festive period, where they've started well under Ancelotti. Realistically, they're going to play a fairly second-string for this game as well.
Well, I think it kind of ties into the whole Premier League dominance as well, because the reason that we're so happy when a game like Liverpool Everton comes up is that it's so big that Liverpool might not be able to rest players in it. Like, it's the Merseyside derby has such a grasp on the audience that Liverpool can't afford not to win it. So they have to play some sort of strong team. Whereas if it was Liverpool against a Championship side, they'd probably play the same side that they played in the Carabao Cup over the winter, when the first team were over playing the Club World Cup. And it's just a pity that the competition has got to this stage, and it's something that ties into the fact that there's so many games televised these days. There's so much football on. The festive period, we're absolutely bombarded with games all throughout Christmas and all throughout the year. And then sometimes you just get to the FA Cup and you're like, I'll just take a break from the football this weekend. I won't bother watching any of it. And if there was less games on TV, then the FA Cup would still hold the charm and the magic that it would. If it was one game, I used to love the FA Cup growing up, because it was the one game that I could watch on TV, because it was on terrestrial TV, it was on BBC, you could watch it. I couldn't watch any of the other games, so it held that little bit of magic to you. So if that was what football was about nowadays, then it would still hold the same kind of, I don't know, what would you call it? It would be still a top trophy that teams want to win, instead of a chance for players to get a rest. Just to mention Liverpool, before we look at the FA Cup game, they've done remarkably well over a very busy December, with the exception of their under-23s literally playing against Aston Villa. They continue that winning run going. They're unbeaten now in Anfield for 51 league games. They've won 18 straight at home in the league as well. They've put themselves in a remarkable position, particularly given the fixtures they had as well, Phil. If you take, we mentioned Sheffield United going really well this year. Leicester were very good and were made to look very ordinary in that game a couple of weeks ago over the festive period as well. Liverpool have just motored on, despite their trip to the Middle East in the middle of it as well.
Like the trip away, the worry was when they came back that the teams around them would have closed the gap. But actually, City beating Leicester stopped Leicester from closing the gap. Then Wolves went and beat Man City. That did Liverpool a favour. And Liverpool obviously won all their games, but the most impressive game was the one on the 26th against Leicester, where this is a game that would have been looked at their first game back after becoming the World Club champions. But this was a chance for Leicester to close the gap and maybe give Leicester and Man City a glimmer of hope.
Because it seemed well set up for Leicester as well. Liverpool have played 120 minutes plus against Flamengo on the Saturday in the Club World Cup. They would have had a lengthy enough flight back after some celebrations after the game as well. In theory, Liverpool should have been leggy, but they were still able to press that game.
Yeah, but the thing is, they're flying home. They've got leg room on those flights home, you know. They're flying home in comfort. But from the moment the first whistle went in that game, Liverpool were on it, and they won 4-0, and that, like, it actually could have been more. Leicester didn't even have a shot on target. Bit harder fought against Wolves, but that's probably just a credit to how good this Wolves team is as well. And watching the game last night, once Liverpool scored the goal after 4 minutes, you knew, first of all, they weren't losing the game. Worst case scenario, they don't get a second goal and they concede, but they're not even conceding goals anymore. In terms of trying to take players out for Sunday, I get what Enda's saying about Everton being a fixture where they don't want to lose, but Klopp made a load of changes for the league game against Everton in December, and they still hammered them. They have an unbelievable record against Everton. He might be forced to keep a few lads in, the likes of Van Dijk, because he doesn't have options at centre-half because of injuries. Minamino, don't know if he'll start him.
He's getting some game time though.
You'd imagine he's going to get some game time, and as one-sided as that Merseyside derby was in the league, this will be a much tighter affair. But honestly, if Liverpool lose, it'll hurt for a little bit, the fact that they've lost to Everton. But if Everton go on to get knocked out in the next round or the fifth round or later in the competition, Liverpool fans at that stage, I'm sure, will have forgotten about it, because unless Everton beat Liverpool on Sunday and go on and win the Cup, Liverpool fans really won't be too bothered if they go on and win the Premier League. The FA Cup is insignificant.
I wonder as well, and given the situation that Liverpool are in now, that they're in a double digits lead, could be 16 if they win their game in hand as well, does that mean that maybe they might be able to prioritise some other competitions between now and the end of the year? Or do you reckon this whole millstone of not having won the league since 1990 means it has to be all focus on the Premier League, with trying to retain the Champions League as a second priority?
No, I don't buy into that at all. If you're a great team, you go and win whatever trophies that you're up there for. And in the past, the teams that are remembered are the teams that have gone for all the trophies. And I know it was probably easier if you look at, say, the United 99 treble. It was probably easier back then because there's less games. But at the same time, that team's going to be remembered forever. Same if you look at the Chelsea team that won the FA Cup and the Premier League. If you look at the United teams that won multiple doubles or throughout the history of the Premier League, these great teams are the ones that are remembered. And if Liverpool are prioritising a league and just letting other cups slip for the sake of just winning that league, then they're doing something wrong there, in my opinion. They have to be going full whammy for all these competitions. And I just want to touch on what Phil was saying about Liverpool changing the side. What I meant when I was saying that was Liverpool will not make changes in the sense of in the way that they made changes in the Carabao Cup, and they're not going to be playing their second team. They'll be playing, I would say Lallana will probably start again, but in midfield they're a little bit. Origi will start. He'll probably drop Mane or Salah to the bench, and the likes of Milner will probably come in again, and he'll change the team enough. But whether that side will be good enough to beat Everton, who are probably going to be going for this competition under Carlo Ancelotti, it's going to be interesting to see if it's enough.
What have you made of Ancelotti so far, Enda? Because it seems both himself and Duncan Ferguson have steered the ship quite nicely over this 5-6 game period now.
Well, I love Ancelotti. He's such a classy manager. Some of the reports from Germany are interesting, that the Munich players wanted more out of his trainings, that he kind of let them off to their own accord, that he wanted them to act like professionals regardless of he wasn't setting a regimented training session. It was he'll set the drills up and they have to do it themselves, basically, is what he was doing, and they got a little bit sick of that. Maybe that's exactly what these Everton players need, is that the last couple of years they've been focused under Marco Silva and it just hasn't clicked with them. So maybe they need a manager to come in, and it's got to be encouraging for those Everton players, for a manager of that stature to want that Everton job. as well. Like, imagine the likes of Calvert-Lewin, Richarlison, those younger players in that Everton side. When Carlo Ancelotti walks in the door, this man has won multiple Champions Leagues. So it's a sign of intent for Everton, first of all. And it's also, it would give them a boost in their morale as well, going into these kind of games, that they can go out and they can beat the likes of Liverpool, because Carlo Ancelotti coming into the club, that's a sign of intent that Everton want to move forward. And I think if they had went back to David Moyes, it would have been the complete opposite effect.
Phil Ancelotti's a good cup manager as well. He's won the cup previously with Chelsea. He's won multiple European Cups across various different clubs as well. He has said at his press conference this morning as well that he sees no reason why Everton can't go quite far in this competition. Is that maybe a signal of intent with the type of team that Ancelotti might pick for this weekend?
He'll go strong, and I think the way the FA Cup is now for the Premier League teams is the draw dictates how serious they'll take it. So you hope for a nice home draw in the third round against lower league opposition where you can rest players and you get through, and gradually as you work your way through it, then your team start to get stronger when you get closer to the finish line. But Ancelotti will go, he knows that Everton haven't won a trophy since the FA Cup in '95, but also he knows how bad their record is against Liverpool, that if he wins, especially at Anfield, the last time they won in the league at Anfield was 1999. If he wins at Anfield on Sunday, that is a massive statement for him early doors. Like, he's already come in and done well, and Everton fans, probably some of them still trying to get their head around the fact that they've got a manager of Ancelotti's stature now, that if they leave Anfield on Sunday with a place in the fourth round, like he just keeps going up and up, and buys him some time because he's got work to do with the club in terms of some players that he needs to bring in and players that they need to get rid of, and what kind of identity he wants with the team, what way he wants to play. But one thing we've seen since he's taken over, and this was something that started when Duncan Ferguson came in as a caretaker manager, was they've got a bit of fight about them now. So more of that, and his job then is to build on that and bring in more quality.
Quite excited as well, Phil, the fact that he's used Seamus Coleman at the right side of a back three.
Yeah.
And potentially with Matt Doherty back to good form with Wolves. We've seen over the last month his winner against Man City, playing as an effective right wing back for Wolves at the moment as well. Has to give an option for Mick McCarthy to have a think about now.
He'll have a think about it, but he
probably won't change from the back four.
He can't, because Mick the game will come along in March against Slovakia, and he'll say, right, so here we are, a knockout game, and you want me to try out a new formation. And that's how Mick will justify it. So the way things are, he's going to have a situation where he's to decide, is it Matt Doherty or Seamus Coleman?
It's unfortunate not to have one of the Republic of Ireland's absolute form players in the Premier League not in the team.
Yeah, no, I know, and it's funny, I think back to the game against Denmark where Matt Doherty scored, and a couple of times Mick McCarthy referenced how Matt Doherty was at fault for the goal. And I just thought, was that a deliberate thing? So come March, if Coleman and Doherty are both available for selection, that Mick will...
I'm picking solidity first, and I don't want mistakes.
Yeah, and look, I agree though. I think the three at the back with wing backs, because our two wing backs would be two in-form wing backs in Doherty and Enda Stevens, that Seamus Coleman would work in that three, similar to how Azpilicueta worked in Conte's three at the back.
Or Walker from Man City. It's a great kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think it would work, but Mick McCarthy will say there's no way I can try it, because he tried three at the back against Switzerland and just got rid of it after about half an hour. It wasn't working. So he doesn't have time to...
Well, they hadn't worked on it as well.
Yeah, because he didn't have time.
Yeah.
If he had, he would argue that if he didn't get the job at the start of a qualification campaign, he could have worked on all these formations beforehand. But
arguably, if he had 2.5 months now as a club manager to get ready for that game, it would be very different to maybe 2 weeks in camp before it, or a week in camp. And we'll get a prediction from you then on this one. Who's going through from this Merseyside derby?
It's going to be tight, but I think Everton will give it a good shot, but Liverpool will eventually win it, because the record at Anfield stands for itself. Everton's record in this game stands for itself. They haven't won since 2010. 19 games now, they haven't beaten Liverpool, so it's just all odds are stacked against them.
I wonder if Origi's going to be on the score sheet as well. This is a type of game.
That was the thing. That was such a jammy goal, but I would say Liverpool will come through this.
The last thing they need, by the way, is there's no replays.
No replays of this round.
But they don't want extra time. But I don't know. I think it's hard to make a call on it right now because I'd like to see the Liverpool team. That's not me trying to...
I think it's going to be true of a lot of games this weekend.
Yeah,
I think
the
if people
FA
can have
Cup's
a
the
punt,
weekend that you really do need the teams before you can make a call.
wait up an hour before kick-off.
See, if Van Dijk isn't playing for Liverpool, then I would make Everton favourites. That's how big a player Van Dijk is. Whereas if he is playing, then it's a closer game.
he'll probably carry their defender through with him then.
Yeah, and that's what he does. He's the constant in the last couple of years. So I kind of have a feeling that Everton might get this done, but I don't know until I see the Liverpool team. He must be looking at resting one of the fullbacks at least.
Surely has to rest them. Surely has to rest most of his front three.
So does he put Milner in as a left back?
Possibly. Gomez maybe move to right back.
Nico Williams.
Yeah.
He was on the bench last night. He could get a go. So I think Everton will go full 11. And that's why I'd be thinking they might actually get a result. And as I said, it'll hurt Liverpool for a while. But if Everton don't go on to win the cup, Liverpool will forget about it quick enough, I'm sure.
Yeah, I get the feeling it's probably the last of the priorities for Liverpool at the moment. Don't forget our football coverage here on Off the Ball is with thanks to Paddy Power. For more information on responsible gambling, check out dunlewy.net. And also Paddy Power is home to ACCA Insurance as well. Money back is a free bet if one leg of your fourfold games let you down. Terms and conditions apply on all of these markets across the UK, Ireland and European games. The maximum free bet is €10 or £10 per day, and terms and conditions do apply. But if you're having an FA Cup accumulator for this weekend, there is ACCA Insurance on there as well. You might need it, given some of the fixtures that are on. We're moving on from the Merseyside derby to Wolves against Manchester United. This tie happened a couple of rounds later last year, and Wolves knocked Manchester United out, Phil. I can't help but think that Wolves will be licking their lips potentially here as well. They've balanced their squad quite well across the competitions this year.
Yeah, this is a game where I think both teams will go fairly strong. I know Solskjaer has said that Romero starts in goal, but the way De Gea is playing at the moment, that's not a big difference. Romero said it before, I think he's the best backup goalkeeper in the Premier League. He would get into most Premier League teams, and including some of the top teams. So you know that Solskjaer, we don't know how long he's going to last at United, but I kind of felt last season that they had a really good chance of winning the FA Cup, so that was a big blow to lose to Wolves. If they were to lose again tomorrow, then the pressure will be on him again. Another trophy goes by, and he can't win a Champions League. Obviously they can't win the Premier League, so he has to go for these trophies. Like the League Cup coming up, the two legs
with Man City.
And if they were to get knocked out of that, it'd probably be more acceptable than being knocked out by Wolves, where I think Wolves will make changes as well, but they don't have the biggest squad. But we don't really, like, Wolves lose to the likes of Watford, but then they push Liverpool all the way. They beat Manchester City. So
they seem to enjoy genuinely playing the big teams who take the game to them. It seems to suit Wolves' game to sit back and counter with all the pace they have in their team.
Actually, United drew at Molineux earlier this season in a game that they were pretty good, and then Traore kind of changed the game where they moved them up, and he had a hand in the equaliser. But I think that United, this is a game that I actually think United might get the result, where they were hopeless against Arsenal, but they just seem to have a knack when you expect the least from them, they actually come up with a performance.
I'm not having it, by the way, that Adama Traore does not go to the gym.
If he's not going to the gym, then I want to know what he's eating or what's in his genes that he's talking about, because he's an absolute animal.
And when it comes to this game, in terms of Wolves against Manchester United, then Wolves got their tactics absolutely spot on against Manchester United last year. It was one of the first times as well that people were fuming about VAR in England because of some of the decisions in that game, with Lindelof not being sent off during it as well. But Manchester United, we sound like a broken record to an extent about their consistency, but since Solskjaer has got the job, going back to last March, United haven't run off 3 successive wins in a row. It just feels all the time really stop-start with them.
Yeah, they're kind of all over the place, and it's hard to see where they're going to string those 3 games on the trot, because they get to a stage where you think the likes of Rashford, the likes of Martial, they're on it, and then the next game they're just cold and they don't know what to do. And we saw it again over Christmas when they came up against Arsenal. They were just really, really poor in that first half. It comes down, this is one of the games that we spoke about United, or the bigger squads want to rest some of their players, but United actually can't rest any players because they're currently playing with their squad.
Their midfield,
and that's
especially,
all it is.
decimated
So yeah,
at the
so
moment.
Pogba's out, McTominay's out, so you're looking at a likelihood of Fred, Pereira, Matic, or Mata in the midfield. Since Matic played against Arsenal, you'd imagine he's going to drop to the bench. So that means Mata playing an attacking role with Fred and Pereira dropping deep. Will he give Fred a rest because he has been playing quite a bit? It's hard to know. He might play Jesse Lingard in a midfield three, or
I think Fred probably has to play though, because Wolves have plenty of legs and movement in the middle of their team.
well, United don't have any, dare I say it, controlling midfielder without Fred in that centre midfield, defensive centre mid partnership he had with McTominay or Pereira, because Pereira offers little to nothing. So it's going to be a difficult one for United, especially if Wolves start their strongest team, because Wolves have a better overall midfield. If that is the case, if Mata is starting, United's game's going to be a little bit slower. So it's just hard to know what to do. If United go at Wolves the way that they went at teams where they get the ball and play it over the top early doors, they can do serious damage to this Wolves team. But if they start to try and control the game, slow it down, then Wolves are going to destroy them. They're going to walk all over them.
Man United very poor, it remains to be said, during the week against Arsenal as well. A very flat performance. A game where Arsenal, who looked a bit short of legs against Chelsea in the second half of the weekend, I wonder were they going to tire, but they looked really comfortable and really in control against United during the week. What went wrong?
They just pressed United as hard as they could. They put pressure on the United defence. Maguire, I saw there was a video doing the rounds of him panicking on the ball a couple of times because he took too many touches, and that's been...
And one of his poor passes, he wasn't under any particular pressure either.
Yeah.
He just played it terribly.
It's been a pattern in United's play. The slower they play the ball, the more they try and keep hold of possession, the worse they actually look, because they don't have the players to do it, and they don't have that creative spark in midfield that can play that final ball in behind the defence. They need to get the ball, play it over the top to James or Rashford to run onto, and then you have the players coming on, running in support. That's what United have identified as their strength. That's when they do the damage. That's what they did against Man City when they tore them to shreds in the first half, and then they drop. And it's just, you just wonder, is it fitness, or is it a mentality issue? Is it just the fact that they're inexperienced players? But they're not that inexperienced at the same time. Martial has played quite a few games for United. Rashford has been playing for 3 or 4 years now. So you have to expect them to finally step up and be the main man for United. And Rashford has been good this year, but there has been games where his head has dropped and he just hasn't looked at the races. So you need Martial, you need Rashford, and you need James to be all firing on all cylinders for United to be a top-class team.
Phil, it's interesting that our sponsors, Paddy Power, have cut Paul Pogba to leave to join Real Madrid, particularly to 5-2 today as well. The odds have been kind of dropping over the last few days, I think, since Miro first made his comments about Manchester United. He has gone under surgery at this stage. Apparently he's out for at least 2 weeks, but that would still leave him plenty of time to pass the medical if he was to go to Madrid. I'm sure Ole Gunnar Solskjaer had to clarify his comments again this morning, is sick of talking about Paul Pogba and what's happening and not having him available. Do you think he is still going to be at Old Trafford come the 1st of February?
I hope not, because I like Solskjaer. I'm sick of talking about him. Even if he does stay, then do we have to listen for the rest of the season? Where does Paul Pogba fit into the team? He's been there since 2016. He's never put in a sustained quality, a sustained amount of quality performances where you think, yeah, you could build a team around him. He'll go to Real Madrid and he'll look like an unbelievable player because he'll be playing in a winning team and he won't have to roll up his sleeves. And he's a talented player, there's no doubt about it. But unfortunately, United isn't the club for him because they have so many issues and Paul Pogba can't solve them all on his own. And there's a lot of pressure on him. And I'd say he just thinks the sooner I get out of there, the better.
And maybe a bit like France, where he's got a couple of runners guaranteed for him in midfield, whether that be Kante or Matuidi. These guys are going to do the work for him, and he's able to then do the luxury things he does extremely well, the defence-splitting 60-yard pass or the shot on goal, which at Manchester United he's expected to roll his sleeves up a bit because they just don't have that kind of quality of runner around him.
No, and it'll be tough because United fans were so excited when he arrived back in 2016 and they'd seen him at the Euros and thought, yeah, this is some player we're getting, and no doubt the ability he has, but then he could go off to someone else and he'll be unbelievable, and they'll be thinking, where was this player for the last 3 years? We got glimpses, but not enough. And so the sooner they move on, for like both the player and the club, the better. So United can build and get other players in midfield. That is the one area they're so undermanned, where they have no creativity. They don't have enough good ball players. Like Fred is their most mobile midfielder. McTominay's been very good for them this season, but he's injured now. I actually think the way they need to play against Wolves is just sit in and play in the break, and it might actually suit them. And as I said, when you think they're in trouble, they tend to come up with a performance, and Wolves will actually really fancy it. So it might play into United's hands, where there'll be an expectant crowd at Molineux where they think, yeah, United are there for the taking, go get them, and then United can hit them on the break.
And give me a prediction.
I'm going to go with the United win, even though it did sound pessimistic for them in the last couple of minutes. But again, like what Phil was saying, every time you think United are going to put a performance that's going to be dismal, they come up with something brilliant, like they did against Man City. So I'm going to go with United winning this.
And I'll give you first call on the next one as well, which is Arsenal against Leeds. Leeds have been really impressive in the Championship so far this year. They've been flying up around the top of the league. And you would imagine that Arsenal, having played their first choice team, given their injuries as well, if it come off the back of two difficult games, Chelsea and Manchester United, Leeds is surely be eyeing up a shock here.
Yeah, you can imagine Arteta's going to rotate for this game, because the Arsenal players were dropping like flies in the last 5 minutes against United. And even David Luiz alluded to the fact that they're not physically there to be challenging for what they want to be challenging for, which is an indictment of Unai Emery especially.
It is, yeah.
Because you could just see there was 3 or 4 Arsenal players pulling up a cramp, and that's an unusual thing to see, and it shows you the high demand that Arteta is going to expect from these players going forward. So you'd think that this is probably going to be one that they're going to make 1 or 2 changes. I can't imagine they're going to rotate the squad too much, because if Arteta sees one competition, it could be the FA Cup. If he wins that in his first year, then that gives him serious momentum going into summer. It's
interesting, Phil. The Europa League and the FA Cup are there as live options for Arsenal, despite their mid-table form that they've had in the league. How serious or how much do they prioritise this game then?
I think they'll put huge emphasis on it, because I think the beauty of the Arteta appointment was it didn't happen straight after Emery. Ljungberg did pretty bad, so that actually in a way is making
lower the expectations.
Yeah, absolutely. So Arteta took over a team that was in, like, sure, one stage Ljungberg was saying to the board in interviews, can we get this sorted, because basically I don't want to do this, so you need to get your manager sorted. So Arteta's come in, you can see what he's looking for, and I understand what David Luiz means, and I don't know, like Unai Emery he had a certain way he wants them to play. You saw, like, watching the United game the other night kind of reminded me of what Arsenal did to Spurs last season at the Emirates, where they just outworked them, and it kind of caught us on the hop a bit, where not many people saw it, but it was rare that we saw those kind of performances under Emery, whereas that is going to be what Arteta demands. That is the very least, that you outwork teams. Unfortunately, they're going to run out of gas in most games, so they're going to have to score goals in the first half and almost sit in the second half and just plug holes with the makeshift defence they have, and maybe they can pick off teams on the break in the second half of games. But I think Arteta, at the time, I thought when he was sitting in the Manchester City dugout watching that game against Arsenal, did he think, or was he put off by it? But obviously he wasn't. And
well, he's tried something different. He's tried to do what Unai Emery was unable to do, which is get his 4 best players onto the pitch at the same time. Mesut Ozil was pretty much jettisoned. Pepe had lost his kind of role as Emery was coming towards the end of his time there. And it's a way of getting, Aubameyang has to play wide and maybe play in positions where you'd prefer him to be closer to goal. But Lacazette and Aubameyang are both starting in the same team. It is going to be a balance issue, but he's trying his best to get all 4 of them firing.
And then you bring in Torreira as well, who's like a little pit bull in midfield as well. So, he looks at what he has. He's got so much attacking talent there. Why not just play it all? And it'll be fun. I thought even before the start of the season, Arsenal were going to be fun to watch because you can't trust it at the defence. So even if they're ahead in games, they're still a little bit fragile. But you know, one of the hardest things is to get teams to function in an attack. He can do that, so he needs to start building in terms of a defence. And if he can go out and get a centre half in January, that might ease the pain a bit. But unfortunately for him as well, his two best fullbacks are injured. Although Kolasinac was very good on New Year's Day against United. The only thing is, we've seen this before where he has games like that and then the next week he can look lethargic. And
it doesn't fill you with confidence when Mustafi is there, David Luiz is in the centre of that defence as well. Their options are quite poor, really. You'd imagine if this is going to be a summer rebuild, it'd be difficult to actually get a defender, I think, in this coming transfer window. Yeah,
and you think of some of the options they could have got. You look at someone like Gary Cahill's had a good season at Crystal Palace. That would have been a nice free transfer they could have got, and they didn't bother. But look, that's out of Arteta's hands now. He just has to focus on what he has. But get a centre half, and I think like they're not finishing in the top 4. So if they can finish top 6, good run in Europa League and FA Cup, then Arteta will be. You can start judging them on next season.
And give us your prediction on Arsenal Leeds.
I think Arsenal are going to win it. It'll be tight, but Arsenal will nip it.
Phil, you going to say?
Yeah, I think so. But I think it'll be a really good game.
Yeah, it'll be an attacking game because the two sides go at each other. Yeah, should be good.
Okay, we've got loads of fixtures this weekend. I think there's 20 odd to be played tomorrow afternoon alone, whatever about the games that are being played on Sunday. Any potential shocks that stick out for you, Phil, as we finish up here?
I'm looking at Rochdale and Newcastle. I think back to how Rochdale gave United problems in the League Cup this season. Newcastle decimated with injuries and starting to lose games now. And I think Rochdale will fancy their chances at this one at home against a Premier League team. This will be a big scalp for them. So
that game's on BT Sport tomorrow at 12:30 as well.
Yeah, so I think that could be one that I'm looking at. And you know, you're wondering as well, Spurs are going to Middlesbrough. What kind of team? Like Jose didn't have a chance to have a crack at the League Cup, which is usually
I wonder if he's a bit like Ancelotti here, though, and he thinks this is a potential trophy.
Yeah, absolutely. And Middlesbrough away is a fairly winnable game for Spurs, but the pressure would be on him if they were to go to Borough and lose, because they've lost 3 of their last 7, and it's not going as well as people might have hoped for Mourinho. It's very early days, but it's just 1 or 2 signs and that the mask has slipped, that the charm offensive is over. And a few weeks ago when he was, you know, lauding the ball boy, or
now he's calling officials idiots.
If he was giving Troy Parrott the match ball, even though he didn't score a hat-trick, and everyone's thinking, Jose, this is the new Jose. Nah, the mask slipped. His New Year's resolution must have been, bring back the old Jose.
We've got Jose 2005 model at the moment. Enda, who are you picking for shocks of the weekend then?
Well, I looked at 3 potential games that might be a slip-up for a Premier League side. You have Bournemouth against Luton Town. Bournemouth are in terrible run of form at the minute, but so are Luton. So I've kind of scratched that one off. Preston against Norwich could be a potential one. Preston currently in the playoff position in the Championship.
Norwich's mind's
drawn on points. Norwich, are they going to prioritise the league? It's probably a good idea if they do, because they're not going to go any further in this competition. They're not going to win it. So why not prioritise the league? Try stay in it. Make a few changes. I would like to see Adam Ida get a run out in that game. And then a third one might be Brighton against Sheffield Wednesday again in the playoff position for Championship, but Brighton are quite good at home. So my pick is going to be Preston against Norwich.
I thought the Brighton fans were coming after you again there.
Always having a go with Brighton.
Yeah, Enda Coll, he's a big favourite on the Brighton fan boards after his comments about Potter earlier this season. Okay, if you're having a punt on the games this weekend, the very best of luck to you. We'll speak to you again next Friday from noon here on Off the Ball. I was sure you were going to go for Brighton.